Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing very well. I just watched Snow White. Yeah, let's talk about it. So Snow White was directed by Mark Webb, who also directed 500 Days of Summer, and Gifted, which was a 2017 movie that starred Chris Evans. That was actually quite excellent. But he is most known for directing the Amazing Spider-Man movies that starred Andrew Garfield. And so, his filmography is a little bit spotty, it's a little bit inconsistent, but he is the latest in an increasingly long line of directors that has been charged with creating a live action adaptation of a Disney animated classic. But this isn't just any old Disney animated classic, because Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was, of course, the very first Disney animated film, which came out almost 100 years ago in 1937. So I would say the stakes were decently high when it came to Snow White, especially considering that she is one of the most beloved and well-known Disney princesses, and she was the very first, as I say. So the stakes were definitely high when it came to this live action remake, and it certainly doesn't help that there have been other remakes and adaptations of this very same story, because it does belong to the public domain, much to Disney's disappointment. And so people were inevitably going to compare this live action remake coming from the House of Mouse themselves with the other live action remakes that we have seen in especially the last decade or so that have come from other studios like Mirror Mirror and the Snow White and the Huntsman franchise. So there was a lot weighing on this film already, just when it was announced that it was going to be happening. But that's not even including the controversy. That's not even including the controversy. So when you throw all of that into the mix, you have quite the chaotic storm brewing. But now that this film has finally landed on the big screen, we can finally see for ourselves how it ended up turning out. And, it was kind of a disaster. We're gonna have a good time with this review at the very least. Like, sit back, grab yourself some snacks, because I have a lot to say, and so hopefully this at the very least will be an entertaining review, and it's good that we're going to get some positive out of this mess. So in terms of the story, the live action Snow White stays pretty faithful to the story of the original animated film. It retells the story of Snow White, who was the princess daughter of the benevolent king of a mythical kingdom. And initially he was so happy with his wonderful prosperous kingdom and his beautiful wife that had given him a wonderful daughter who was born in the middle of a snowstorm, and that's why she's called Snow White. But unfortunately his beloved wife fell sick, and he quickly found himself having to remarry, this time around to an evil, vapid, selfish woman who became known as the Evil Queen. Now, this king, as benevolent as he was still a colonizer. And so he had to do what he did best, which was colonize the southern lands. And so he went out to battle, but unfortunately didn't make it back. The southerners were able to fight for themselves after all. They said no to the colonizer and they killed him, or at least that's what the Evil Queen said. So the king ended up dying, and the Evil Queen consort became the Evil Queen as she ascended to the throne. And that's when everything just became a mess. Like, that's when the kingdom fell to disrepute, because all of that prosperity and wealth that belonged to the people was now siphoned over to the queen. She ended up hoarding all of that wealth for herself and oppressed the native people of the land, conscripting some of the able-bodied men of the land to fight in her army. Now that I said that plot point out loud, maybe the casting for the Evil Queen does make sense after all. Anyways, as the years go on, the people become poorer and poorer as the queen continues to increase taxation and siphon all of the wealth of the kingdom for herself. The people are going hungry, they have no food, and it's during these low times that we're introduced to a grown-up Snow White, who, despite the fact she is a whole princess and the rightful heir to the throne, is being treated like a common servant in her own home, the castle itself. You know, she is doing all of this cleaning on her hands and knees, scrubbing up, dabbing, even though she's royalty, like even though she has more right to be in that building than the evil queen does, but somehow she's subservient to this evil woman. Again, you know, this casting decision this casting decision might make more sense than I thought it did. Now, it's on one of the days that Snow White is doing her chores that she stumbles across a thief who's trying to get a hold of some of the palace's food supply. And it's here that we meet Robin Hood. Oh, sorry. I mean, Jonathan, the new character that this film inexplicably created. We'll talk about the love story in a second, but Jonathan is a thief slash rebel fighter who claims to do all of this in the name of the old king, although really, does he? Again, we'll discuss, but he's out here trying to get some food. He's trying to get fed because, again, like I said, people are going hungry, like there's nothing to eat, and the queen is hoarding all of the wealth and resources, including the food of the land. Now, unfortunately, Jonathan gets caught for thieving and the queen is ready to throw him in the dungeons, but Snow White decides to stand up for him. She said, no, don't throw him in the dungeon, like he doesn't deserve this, and that just aggravates the queen. So instead she threatens to have him killed. She's like, well, actually she throws him outside by the palace gates so he can just freeze to death, and like, well done Snow White, you made it worse. So Snow White's day has gone from bad to worse, you know, so has Jonathan's, but it's not about him because the evil queen absolutely hates her guts. But the very fact that Snow White stood up to her and tried to save Jonathan's life has changed the dynamic a little bit, because the evil queen goes to her secret room where she implores to her magic mirror, mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all, as she usually does. And usually the magic mirror is like, girl, it's you, bitch. Like, of course, you know you're the baddest bitch in town. Like, who's even coming close to you, boo? Like, don't even worry about it. But this time around, when she goes to her magic mirror, the mirror has the audacity to be like, actually, sorry boo, but you've been replaced. You've been replaced. There's the new fairest of them all and her name is Snow White. Oh, sorry, like try not to get too upset about it. And the evil queen loses her goddamn mind. She starts crashing out. She said absolutely not. So she employs the huntsman to take care of business, kill Snow White in the forest and bring back her heart as proof, and also a cheeky little souvenir, like how you would get a fridge magnet, like when you go to a museum or something. I have a bunch of those. So the huntsman lures Snow White into the enchanted forest with the full intention of killing her and bringing back her heart to the evil queen. But after seeing how much of a bright light she is in this dark, gloomy world, he decides to spare her, but warns her to run away. Run, Simba, and never return. Never return. And she's like, okay, and starts running into the enchanted forest. The huntsman ends up returning to the palace empty-handed, save for an apple, which is of course an all-important motif in the Snow White story. The evil queen eventually figures out that the huntsman failed to kill Snow White as he instructed her to, so she throws him in the dungeons and then gets her army to try and find her all across the enchanted forest, but they fail to do so as well, because she ends up getting the help of none other than not Robin Hood and his little crew. And so they, alongside the 7 dwarves, are able to evade the guards as well, but not before Jonathan is taken to the castle and thrown in the dungeons himself for trying to save his precious love. Again, we'll talk about the love story in a second. After all of this chaos and madness and failure, the evil queen decides that she has had enough and decides to take matters matters into her own hands by enchanting herself into becoming an old lady with a poison apple, which she takes all the way to the house in the middle of the enchanted forest that is inhabited by the 7 dwarves, and where she knows Snow White is currently hiding. She meets Snow White in front of the house and she lures her into taking a bite of the poison apple, and Snow White unfortunately falls asleep. She falls asleep. And the only way that she can awaken from this slumber is with true love's kiss. Ooh, I wonder what's gonna happen next. That's essentially the highlights of the story of Snow White. This live action adaptation largely stays true to the original story of the animated version, with a couple of tweaks here and there. Like I said, across all of Disney's live action adaptations, we have seen different strategies where sometimes they will take the original material and twist it and turn it and do something completely new. But more recently, we have seen them just kind of stay true to the source material and do a repeat, basically like a whole, note by note retelling of the very same story that was depicted in the animated film. And that largely came about because of the backlash and the poor reviews for some of the live action adaptations where they took more risks in the storytelling. But I have to say that the more faithful approach for Snow White was a huge mistake. And that's mostly because the original Snow White story was kind of weak and blah and didn't really need to be repeated. It didn't really need to be repeated. As much as this film holds a very special place in Disney and film history as the very first Disney animated classic, you would be very hard pressed to find anyone who would say that the original Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs is their favorite Disney film. I mean, maybe there are people out there. There was certainly a whole bunch of people online pretending that it was when the casting for this film was announced. But you would be hard pressed to find any real Disney fans who would say that Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs is their favorite film. And one of the many reasons for that is because the story is one of the weaker ones in the roster. And so I actually think it's unfortunate that they decided to go down the more faithful route for this live action adaptation. I would have been much happier with a whole made up story. Literally just give us a whole new story, something cute, something fun, something adventurous, because the original Snow White story is very bare bones and doesn't really have a lot of meat to it. Now, they did of course introduce some changes, particularly with the new character of Jonathan, who replaces the Prince Charming that was originally in the Snow White story. But that's not the kind of change that I wanted. I'm talking about a full-on change. When it comes to Snow White's father, a big mistake that they made in the film, at least for me as an adult viewer, was making it obvious that the evil queen killed him. Like, I never for a second doubted that the evil queen killed the father. Like it was, I thought it was pretty much a given. Like, I thought we were all on the same page with knowing that the evil queen killed her father, because of course she did, duh. But they tried to present it as this sort of revelation near the end. And so for the majority of the film, Snow White actually believes that she can go to the Southern Kingdoms or wherever and try to find her father. And it's like, no, like, sis, he's gone. Like, he's been gone. Like, they don't even show any like evidence or any kind of reasoning for why she would think he's alive. Like, there's no sign from the forest, from like the magical birds or anything. Like, you don't even find his crown anywhere. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's just no reason why she would believe that he's alive. But she just believes it because like she has hope and faith and pixie dust or whatever. And so she's like, I'm gonna go out there and find my father. And you think she's gonna go on this adventure to go look for him, but no, it just resorts to being the original story from the animated film. Now, in terms of the love story that we did end up getting, on paper it was a shambles. On paper it should have been a disaster because the writing was very, very weak here. I mean, this new Jonathan guy, first of all, he's Robin Hood. Disney already has a character like this, the character that steals from the rich and tries to give back to the poor. Yeah, his name is Robin Hood. Why is this random Jonathan character trying to steal Robin Hood's thunder. He was even wearing green. What was that about? What was that about? He was wearing green and he was somewhat ginger-headed, so it was giving the fox version of Robin Hood from Disney's own roster. So that was crazy to me. But number two, his raison d'etre didn't even make sense in the film, because what was he fighting for? What was he even? Robin Hood has a very clear mission. Again, stealing from the rich to give back to the poor. Like that, you see Robin Hood doing that throughout many iterations of the character, you know, in his stories. But here you have this Jonathan guy who has a gang. Like he has a gang of folks who live in the Enchanted Forest, and they're out here stealing too, and I guess aggressing folks. But like, what does he stand for? What is he doing? Why is he doing it? He claims to be fighting for the king, but like, how do his actions reflect the value of the benevolent king? Like, I don't understand how what he is doing speaks to his mission, you know, speaks to his dogma. I don't get it. I don't really get that sense that Jonathan has been fighting the good fight, you know, in memory and honor of the king. It's just like leading a couple of bandits who are out here stealing from the castle and then, you know, taking their food back to the Enchanted Forest and having a bit of a nibble. Like, like there's nothing bigger about it, and that would be fine. That would be fine in itself, because it removes him from Robin Hood's territory and puts him in, you know, regular old selfish common criminal territory. So that would be good. Except the thing is, we already have that. We already have that version of Jonathan too, and his name is Flynn Rider. Oh yeah, we've already seen this character. No matter how you slice it, it's just like it's a nothing character. They should have just tried to build up the prince. They should have focused on building him up, you know, building a nice storyline around him and Snow White and this adventure of her trying to find her father, so that they could be richer characters and so that their love story could be richer as well. But like I said, on paper, this romance doesn't work. Like, it makes no sense. But here's the thing. Not gonna lie, I was still kind of into it. Okay, sorry, but I am famously the girl who can ship anything and anyone. And so I was still kind of into their little romance, not gonna lie. Like, I was kind of twirling my hair, kicking my feet. I feel like they had some pretty solid on-screen chemistry. It wasn't on the level of the Little Mermaid or anything like that, please, but it was still pretty strong, and I was still kind of rooting for them, even though the story made absolutely no sense. I was just like, I'm kind of happy for Snow and Jonathan. Like, they found love in a hopeless place and an even more hopeless movie, so good for them. Speaking of performances, let's talk about it. Let's talk about the performances in this film. I'm going to join the chorus that came before me in saying that Rachel Zegler was hands down the best part of this entire social experiment. Like, Rachel Zegler was hands down the best part of the Snow White live action remake. She really sold it as Snow White. I think she was perfectly cast. She had the look down. Even the quirky little bob, which is actually explained in the story, by the way, even though people hated on it for the longest time. I didn't actually think it looked that bad. I thought it was kind of cute on her. Like, aw, Snow White. Even aside from the controversial bob, I think Rachel Zegler absolutely sold it as this character. She had that kind of light and kindness emanating from her. It felt very genuine, and she had that Disney princess quality, which we've seen in most of the actresses that have portrayed these Disney princesses in live action. You know, she is following up a pretty tough act in Halle Bailey as Ariel, who's my favorite live action Disney princess. But I think Rachel Zegler knocked it out of the park. You know, she did what she could, the best that she could, and so big ups to her, because she was given a hellish project to work with, and it's a shame that everything around her was just so bad. Oh, I'm so sorry, Rachel, you deserve better, man. Like, it's awful. And that's on top of the fact that she had so much vitriol thrown her way for being a Latina actress cast in this role. I mean, Halle Bailey once again knows all about that, unfortunately, but despite all of that hate, I think Rachel Zegler rose on top and, like I said, did the very best that she could with these awful circumstances. And when it comes to the second half of the happy couple with Andrew Burnett portraying Jonathan, I thought he did a really good job as well. Again, it took me a while to warm up to this new character who I thought was pointless, but ultimately I did end up liking him purely because of Andrew's performance, like purely because of him. He did have really good chemistry with Rachel Zegler. Again, it's not on the level of Halle Bailey. It's not on the level as Halle and Jonah, make no mistake, but it was good. It was decent. And they were definitely fighting with a subpar script. So the fact that they rose above it and ultimately succeeded, I thought was a triumph. Both of them can sing incredibly well, and to my understanding, Andrew's background is in the stage, and you can definitely tell like he was a stage actor. He was really charming. Again, I think that he should have just played the prince, and they should have just given the prince a more intriguing and richer story so they could be more believable as a love story, but whatever. Ultimately they went down this path, and I thought he rose to the occasion. And actually all this proved is that he could have been a great Flynn rider. They kind of wasted him on this one. Next up we have the Seven Dwarfs, and they were also met with a whole bunch of controversy. There is literally not a single part of this film that wasn't controversial. Every single element of this film was controversial. The dwarves being one of them, because of course they were originally going to be portrayed by little people until Peter Dinklage spoke out against Disney, and he expressed his frustration that it seemed like the studio and Hollywood at large only had certain roles for little people in their projects, and you know, the Seven Dwarfs is the epitome of that issue. And so Disney decided to pivot and have the Seven Dwarfs be CGI animated characters. And so you have this kind of dodgy, uncanny valley portrayal of them, which is so much worse than the original 2D animation. And we've seen other projects like the Lord of the Rings franchise do this sort of thing better. So it's kind of unnerving how Disney just failed to replicate that successful version of these mythical creatures, but whatever. In terms of my opinion, it took me a minute to warm up to the Seven Dwarfs, but ultimately I started to like them. You know, halfway through the film I was like, yeah, I can get on board with this, why not? I really liked Hi Ho. The Hi Ho musical sequence was excellent. I was a big fan of that. I really liked that sequence, and I like the sequence where Snow White is getting them to clean up after themselves. You know, in the original film she's kind of like a housewife for them, and that's of course very dated and it's been criticized a lot. And so here she basically instructs them and project manages them to clean up after themselves and to get along better. And so I really like that sequence. By then I was starting to warm up to the Seven Dwarfs quite a bit, but none of them came close to how much I adored Dopey. Guys, we must protect Dopey at all costs. I am so serious. Dopey is my guy. I have Dopey's back. No one can come for Dopey. Dopey was so adorable. Dopey was so cute. The fact that he was mute as well, like he couldn't express himself in that household of mayhem. Oh my god. I just wanted to hold him close and hug him. I wanted to tell him, Dopey, no one is gonna hurt you on my watch. I swear to God. The fact that they were bullying him, I wanted to slap each and every one of them. Okay, I love Dopey down. He was my favorite character of the whole film, actually. Oh, let's talk about it. He was my favorite character of the whole film. Everyone else can go home, even Snow White herself. Sorry, boo, but Dopey is my guy. He is such a doll. I really love Dopey. So like, yeah, I was good on the rest of the Seven Dwarfs by the second half of the film, but Dopey, I love Dopey from the very second that I saw him. He's so adorable. He's so cute. And also another issue with this new character of Jonathan that's introduced in live action version is that he has his own crew, like the bandits, okay, that he rides with, and they have to contend with the dwarves. Now we have two sets of folks in this very limited screen time that we have to focus on, and so it does a disservice to both groups, particularly the dwarves, who are supposed to be the main focus of the story, because after all it is the story of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, not Snow White and the Seven Bandits. Now finally, when it comes to the performances in this film, we need to talk about the elephant in the room. Miss Gigi, Miss Gal, come to the front. It's your time. It's your time to get a flogging. Listen, if you want to hear what I think of Gal Gadot's performance in this film, because you heard that she's crap, awful, terrible, she can't sing, she can't dance, she can't stand, she can't do anything. Like, if you've heard these things, you're like, Jean, is it true? Is it true that she just can't do the basic, simple skill of acting in this film, this motion picture? I would have to say, yeah. No, I will unfortunately have to confirm that the rumors are true. Gal Gadot cannot act. People have been saying this for a while. I feel like I've given her more credit than most, especially for Wonder Woman 2, which I liked more than most. But things change, okay? Things change all the time. Gal Gadot absolutely cannot act. Watching her on screen was genuinely painful. I wish I was exaggerating. I wish I was exaggerating, guys. I'm so dead ass right now. She couldn't act. She can't act. She can't act, but she's being paid millions to star in a Disney live action. She just couldn't act. Her line delivery was awful. Her facial expressions were awful. Now, mind you, she has this massive crown on her head, and that might have restricted some eyebrow movement here and there. But like, that's not even an excuse. Do you know why? Because we saw Mother Angelina. We saw Mother Angelina Jolie, who had a similar contraption upon her skull, but she ate. She ate each and every time she was on screen as Maleficent. So we've seen it be done. I don't want to hear any excuses about the costume. We've seen it be done, and we've seen it be done spectacularly. Gal Gadot's performance in this film made me fall to my knees and wish I was looking at Angelina instead, or any other talented actress. Literally, like, any other talented actress would suffice, because Gal, like, she's so bad. How can you be bad at sitting down? How can you do that? Ask Gal Gadot. She knows how. And that's before we even get to the music. Before we even get to the musical sequences where she was doing an approximation of singing and dancing, and it was a poor one. It was a poor imitation of both. And finally, many of the other creative decisions or even technical aspects of the film also felt short for me. I would say Snow White, on top of everything else, was also musically challenged. But then when it comes to the technical aspects, like the cinematography, the hair, the makeup, the costuming, all of that was really weak too. The whole package came across as more of a Disney Plus movie, like Enchanted 2 or Hocus Pocus 2, rather than an actual cinematic event that was brimming with magic and high production quality. Bill Condon was able to produce this with the Little Mermaid remake, but unfortunately Mark Webb fell short of it for Snow White. And so, guys, with all of that being said, I'm going to be giving Snow White a 5 out of 10. So that's it from me. Now that I told you guys my thoughts on Snow White, it's time for you guys to let me know what you thought of this movie down in the comments below. Please be sure to subscribe to catch you videos coming up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.